Hello, my name is Aditya Bhatia, and I'll be presenting my LTU project presentation, which was based on Vietnamese language analysis. We'll continue. I'm basically going to cover the history of Vietnamese language, phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and the key cultural insights that I got from my the interview that I conducted with the native speaker of Vietnamese language. So, if we talk about the history of Vietnamese, it's a member of Viet Muang sub-branch, which is Vietic branch, Mon Khmer family, and which is a part of Austroasiatic group. It is basically spoken in Southeast Asia. As we know, Vietnam belongs to the South Asian region, so it is basically 95% of population speaks Vietnamese there. The most notable feature that is very interesting about Vietnamese is that its tonal system is very amazing. Like we have six tones, and according to these tones, the meaning of the word changes, and everything gets changed. So we have six different tones. We'll talk about this in further. So if we talk about the development of how the Vietnamese language get developed to what we see today. So if we talk about from the start, it was Proto-Viet Mong before the 7th century. This is the ancestral form which was shared with the Hmong languages. The Proto-Vietnamese, which was in the 7th between 7th and 9th century, which is the it is basically the start of the formation of Vietnamese identity. Then we talk about the archaic Vietnamese, like the Vietnamese preserving the older features. Like this was basically in the area of Chinese domination, and during this 19th to 10th century, Sino-Vietnamese vocabulary was established. Then come the Asian Vietnamese. So after the Chinese domination existed in Vietnam till the 10th century, and after that, it was development of Chu Nom writing. Then after we talk about Middle Vietnamese between the 17th and 19th century, and then it was like a Latin based script for writing Vietnamese were introduced, and because of that Vietnamese became very popular, and in Vietnam only the 90 or 95% of the literacy was increased because of now the Vietnam was more easier and more approachable to larger mass. So we talk about the modern Vietnamese, which is mostly inflected by English also. So this is the current official language of Vietnam. If we talk about external influence, in the course of history of Vietnamese, so Chinese language, because Vietnam was a part of Chinese domination, so the most profound influence of China is found. 50 to 70% of vocabulary was is derived from Chinese only. So vocabulary, Chinese is majorly found in the vocabulary of science, medicine, politics, and religion. And in the areas like 1884 to 1945, there was French colonization in Vietnam. Therefore, this language was administrative. It was taught in schools and was used as an administrative language. Due to this, its vocabulary is majorly found in the areas of cuisine, fashion, and infrastructure. Talk about modern influences. English has posed some influence of Vietnam. That basically this has shown that Vietnam is coming to the world and integrating to the world. And there's also one more very important feature of Vietnamese language. They do not adapt. They adapt the language. They adapt to the words, the features they borrow. Instead of other languages which directly adopt the words or the features, Vietnamese is known they adapt to the features of there. So they exist. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that you will see influences of other languages, but they'll mostly be adapted by the Vietnamese, and they'll still have some unique identity. So if we talk about demographics and writing systems of Vietnamese, so we have 87 plus million speakers of this is the most top 20 most spoken languages worldwide. So it is an official language of Vietnam, and we have 95% more literacy rate in Vietnam. That's what I told. After the latent script was introduced, the literacy rate is increased by a high level. Writing system, there were writing system developed over the years. The first was Chuno. It was basically Chinese characters. And it was Chunom. It was a hybrid system of Chinese and Latin, and then properly Latin was introduced, like Chu Kau Nu. This was the Latin-based system with diacritical marks to highlight different tones. So dialectical variations, if we see, there are three parts in Vietnamese. You can divide that: Northern Vietnamese, Central Vietnamese, and Southern Vietnamese. Northern Vietnamese was Tonkin region, in which all the six tones are preserved, and it is known as a prestige dialect. In Central Vietnamese, there are only five tones, which exist and they maintain the archaic features from the archaic era. In the southern Vietnamese, like the Bas Anam region, we have five tones and some of them merges into one. Like two of them merges into one. So if we talk about phonology, like we have six tones, like we previously discussed, like Nagang, like a totally flat pitch tone, Yuin is a falling with grave accent tone. It is marked by like we can see that Hoi, like it's like a hook above, it's marked with a hook above, and Nga, it's marked by a tilde, and Sak, it's marked by like similar to that what we have seen Yuan, and Nang, it is marked by a dot below. So this is basically the six tones and how they are marked in the Latin script that is what I have showed you. So if you this is an example of how the word ma changes with different tones. If you tightly speak ma, it means ghost. And if you see mid level like high rising tone, ma, it means cheek or mom. Low rising tone like ma means tom. High broken tone like ma means a horse. These are basically examples of how like word changes with different tones. Like now we'll talk about the consonant, vowels, and syllable structure of Vietnamese. So consonant, we have 17 consonant with very unique features, and we've also seen an important factor lazy versus hard forms. Like hard forms are in like used in formal context, and very careful pronunciation is used. So like consonants are totally different, but in lazy forms, like two or three consonants merge into one, and it is like this lazy form is used in like everyday speech. So when we talk about vowels, we have 11 vowel sounds, and it's a we have a rich variety of diphthongs. For syllable structure, we have a CWVC structure. It's basically an optional initial consonant to C. W means optional medial glide. V is basically a required vowel which is necessary, and C we have an option final consonant. This is basically syllable structure of Vietnamese. Then we talk about the morphology. So basic structure, many morphemes are monosyllabic. The like many of the like words in Vietnamese are monosyllabic. So some people like we have an assumption like bad assumption that Vietnamese is a monosyllabic language, but that is not true. We in Vietnamese polysyllabic words are also allowed, and they're formed by combining monosyllabic morphemes. Here we don't have any morphological markings for case, gender, and number tense, and we use a classifier words for distinctions. If we talk about how do we like form words in Vietnamese, there are basically three methods for that, and we have one of them is reduplication. We repeat all or a part of word to alter the intensity. For example, if we want to increase the intensity of something, like Dao, Dao Dao. Now Dao means hurt, but Dao Dao now means hurt horribly. Decreasing intensity would be Z, Z Z. Z was previously pretty, but Z Z now becomes cute. The meaning changes as we like reduplicate words or a part of word. Compounding, the most common method for making like forming words in Vietnamese is compounding, and we use Z and Lua. So vehicle plus fire becomes Z Lua, that is train. Affixation, there are very limited examples of affixation, and only we have prefix and suffix. And one of them is bad ha is bad ha, becomes unhappy. Hoc sin and hoc sin. This is basically Sino Vietnamese culture, but it is not part of the core Vietnamese culture. It is like borrowed from that. If we talk about grammatical features of nouns, pronouns, and verbs, then you can see that the nouns require classifiers when they are modified by demonstrative or numbers. Example like bow, do, knock, try are like classifiers. Like plurality of nouns is indicated by particles like nuang or kak. We talk about pronouns, the use of pronouns and kinship terms, which we'll talk further also, indicates like how pronouns are used indicates the formality level of the conversation. Example, grandfather, pa, grandmother, co, aunt. These are different pronouns which are used. If we talk about verbs, then they are basically unmarked for tense or aspect. We use particles. Here we use the particles for temporal information. For example, da is for past, se is for future, dang is for progressive, and ro is for perfective. We use these different markers to decode the temporal information instead of like writing something. We use particles. Sorry, we use particles to like represent temporal information instead of marking the tense. Now we talk about the syntax. So we follow a SVO pattern. It is basically an analytic language which relies on word order and not inflection. So Vietnamese is not dependent on inflections. So basic structure is subject, verb, object, and adverbs. So what are the distinctions from English language? We don't have a copula here. We don't need a copula here. And classifiers in Vietnamese are used with numerals. We have an optional subject pronouns, like we have pronoun feature, and the most important feature is the adjectives are positions after the nouns, like which is totally contrasted with English language. If we talk about the syntactic constructions of Vietnamese, like we should talk about three types: relative clause, the causative constructions, and the passive constructions. In causative, we use specific verbs and word order patterns. For example, like no lam cho toi bon, he made me sad. So we have a causative construction, and the three types of causative construction are unintentional, intentional, and manipulative. We talk about the relative clause. We follow it follows a post nominal structure, and its feature is like we don't have any WH movement. Now, by nugo ma toigap, the person I met, the person like that I met. Passive construction we talk about here we use markers rather than morphological changes. Now, markers like do, be, kono are used for indicating that's a passive sentence. For example, hua duo ko gyok hai. So, hua is complemented by the teacher is a translation. And basic structure is subject, passive marker, then the verb. If we talk about the semantics, like we'll talk about kinship terms, cultural context and pronouns, and the color terms. So in kinship terms, they extend beyond the family relationship to universal address. They function as honorifics to show respect. We have different pronouns for showing different respects, and it reflects a web of social relationship with Vietnamese culture. Like it is deeply rooted to represent the Vietnamese culture. So culture, context, and pronouns. We have a complex system of conveying levels of honorific content. Informal pronouns, humilific, and formal pronouns, honorific. Informal pronouns indicate closeness of the conversation and closeness of the people, while honorific creates a respectful distance. Like we get a respect and we honor the person. Then we talk about formal pronouns. This is basically deeply connected with the Vietnamese culture importance of hierarchy. If we talk about color terms and their associations, like we have nine colors and some of them like semantically they are associated with something. So red means luck, happiness, yellow means wealth and royalty, white in Vietnamese is a symbol of purity and mourning, black is evil, bad luck, and in modern world it's known as it's represented as elegance. If you talk about green, it's like hope, freshness, harmony with nature. Blue is a representation of calmness, intellect, and peace. Brown is known for like a representation of sincerity and humility. Pink is generally represented as femininity, sweetness, and innocence. Purple is like nostalgia, romance, sadness, and loyalty. These are the basically color terms, and what are the culture associations with in Vietnamese with respect to colors. So now we talk about the what insights I got from the interview that I took with like native speaker of Vietnamese. So he talked about like thuong, which is a word used in Vietnamese which is even deeper than love. So it's layered with emotions. If we talk about different proverbs which capture the Vietnamese values, then he told me to just uong nuoc no gong. Remember the source when drinking water. It's a very deep proverb. La la dum la rach, the intact leaf wraps the torn leaf. So these are the basic two proverbs that captured Vietnamese values according to the interview of the person that I took. If we have regional dialects that we talk about like northern, southern and central, northern was usually made in national media and education like we talked before, it is standardized language, standardized dialect. In southern, it is increasingly familiar to younger generations and central, it is most challenging to understand because there are also many local words. So this was basically my term paper of the presentation of my term paper. So key takeaways from this is Vietnamese is a tonal language with rich phonological features, heavily influenced by Chinese, yet maintained its unique identity. Yes, Vietnamese is known for that fact. Word formation in Vietnamese is through reduplication and compounding, mainly through that only. Affixation exists as very less, not significant. The syntax of Vietnamese relies on word order and markers, not inflection. The semantics of Vietnamese are deeply intertwined with the social hierarchy and the cultural values. of Vietnamese people. The system of pronouns and kinship terms reflect the complex socialization that existed before also and now also in Vietnamese culture. So this was basically my presentation. Thank you for giving the opportunity. Thank you.